dealing with the mostly sufficient seating, it looks like. But we have a really nice panel tonight with Rena Shah, Lydia Kreft, and Sherry Lee, who are going to talk a little bit about the blockchain applications in energy and some of the pros and cons and opportunities and challenges associated with a really new and exciting software development in a really highly regulated and changing industry. So a little bit about where you're sitting right now. This is K&L Gates. We're a law firm. We have about 2,000 attorneys and about 50 offices around the world. We have a pretty big energy and environmental team. I handle a lot of the California stuff, everything from representing utilities, developers, lenders, anything you need to do to buy, build, and sell renewable and traditional energy products and the commodities that are produced by them. About 2 years ago, we had some clients asking, well, what is this about blockchain energy? Is it something we need to start paying attention to? So we started writing and speaking a bit more on the subject and finding that there's a lot of really good opportunities out there. And personally speaking, the key is to make sure that when you're thinking about blockchain's applications to energy, that you're really not looking to sort of confront head-on a century's worth of utility regulation and a lot of the issues that are involved in creating a new market through regulatory processes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Josh, very much for allowing us to have this space and for hosting all of you guys. So I just want to first say thank you to our sponsors, so K&L Gates and GE. Sherry here will talk a little bit more about GE at the end of the evening. Also want to say thank you to BFest, our streaming video and live streaming and recording partner here tonight. Also want to recognize our co-hosts, Marzanne and Marina. So please introduce yourselves to them later tonight. So we want to just start off and do a show of hands. How many of you have heard about blockchain and energy and are familiar with the use cases? Okay. Okay, about half. Okay, so I'll do a quick intro for those of you who aren't as familiar. So like Buck was saying, there's been a lot of exciting work that's been done in this area. There've been a number of organizations, pilots, millions of dollars invested. And why we think it's so exciting now and why it's so important now is really not just the technical advances, but the unprecedented opportunity that we have to encourage the use of distributed energy resources using blockchain technology. And there are challenges, of course. So there's a but, there's an and. Grid operators struggling to integrate distributed energy resources, a lack of monetary incentives in retail markets. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this one here, the lack of monetary incentive. That was something that really was one that we wanted to work with NREL on, the National Renewable Energy Lab. And we took a little bit different than other companies, a multi-blockchain approach. And that's because, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, that's because we really believe that there will be multiple blockchains used, not just one, and that blockchains under the hood have strengths and weaknesses and should be used for those strengths and weaknesses. Now, in this project that we did, we looked at one of the more distributed or more, I'd say, pie in the sky type scenarios here with peer-to-peer transactions. And earlier, before we started this discussion, we talked about how when we say peer-to-peer transactions, we're saying, look, there's a home that's next to me or a neighbor of mine that I could transact energy with. And in this scenario, the idea is that we're using the blockchain as a ledger to record those energy transactions, and we're also using the blockchain as a platform for payment. We aren't saying that electrons are actually flowing from my house to my neighbor's house, right? But we are saying we're using the grid, and we're partnering with utilities to use the grid for that, energy transfer. So in this case, with NREL, what we did is we showed, I'll go to this first, showed in the lab how we could simulate two test homes, and all the appliances in these test homes, and how using the blockchain as well as the home energy management systems, we could say at this time of day, it's better for this house, for home one, the seller home, right, home two, to be using these appliances, but at a certain time it makes sense for them to sell their energy and sell that energy to home one, and for home one to be using certain appliances. Now, we did some rough calculations with NREL on what this means in terms of revenue for the seller home. And these are very conservative numbers, and what we're looking at is in California, a home that is selling their solar energy could generate $432 a year, and that's after they use energy, their solar energy, their generated solar energy for their own home. So the idea is now not just, are we doing good things by using solar energy or having solar energy in our homes, but we're actually making some money from it when we aren't using it for ourselves. So to summarize, in this project, what we were able to show is that we have a seller and a buyer, and the seller and buyer have home energy management systems and are able to, from the seller, say when they're sending energy over, what energy is actually sent over, use the blockchain to store that energy data, and then the buyer, once they receive that energy, say, okay, I got that energy, it is the energy that we agreed to that I would get in our contract, and I will then send you payment, right? So in this scenario here, the idea is the smart contract, right, that is being established, or that was established between buyer and seller, may be used on, say, the Ethereum blockchain, which is more well known today for contracts. But then another blockchain, one that's more suitable for payments, is used for the payment of that electricity. And in this case, we use Dash, which is not Bitcoin, but one that has lower cost, faster payments than, say, Bitcoin or other blockchains. So just to go into why we took that point of view of using multiple blockchains, and that's because as you guys have probably seen, how many of you have been in this blockchain space or studying it for a while? Okay, so most of you. So you know now that there are blockchains that are more known for store value as opposed to contracts, as opposed to those that are, oh sorry, this slide got a little mixed up, sorry about that. So these blockchains, Dash and Litecoin, are more known for frequent payments. Ethereum is more known for contracts. Bitcoin is a store of value, and then these guys here are more known for privacy, Grid being the newest addition. And then you have other blockchains, enterprise blockchains. And it's through our experience, so during the day I work with BlockCypher, and we've worked with thousands of different companies over the last 5 years. And through our different experiences, we found that these companies will use multiple blockchains, and they'll use BlockCypher in many cases, in multiple blockchains, depending on the part of the business process they're trying to solve and the use case they're trying to address. So is it something that's smart contract or contract related versus payments related, fast payments related versus store of value, and other. And so with NREL, what we really did is partner with them and use their integrated platform, which is called Perceive, to be able to, in this case, take that multi-blockchain approach and now attach it to a platform that allows the home to connect to every device and know when is the right time to turn on a particular appliance, given that time of day, given all the power, the pricing for that power at that time of day. And it was in this project then that we were able to do this peer-to-peer kind of transaction between seller and buyer. Now, what I'm going to end on, and I'm going to show you a quick demonstration of this, but before we do that, I want to just show that this peer-to-peer workflow where we're showing, okay, the seller exports electricity, the buyer consumes electricity, but before doing that, they send the meter data through our technology so that the buyer can receive that, decrypt it, make payment, and then the seller then gets that payment. Now, this sort of process is not so different than something Lydia's going to talk about in a little bit, which is, say, EV charging and other use cases where you have a charger and a buyer as opposed to two peers, or a seller and a buyer. And so whether it's selecting a charger, making a request, and then the charger is interpreting that request, you're still metering or sending data about the energy that was sent over the blockchain, and you're still sending payment over the blockchain. So the use cases are very similar. The technology is essentially the same. So at this point, I wanted to switch over to the demo just so you guys can quickly see what this looks like. And okay. And so okay. So here are two windows representing the seller and the buyer. And after they establish the contract, what you can see is the sales log for, for the seller showing up here, and the energy that's exported from the seller to the buyer. And what you'll see here is then as the seller sends energy over, the energy from the meter reading is sent, it's encrypted on the blockchain. So the blockchain is uniquely designed to encrypt that data securely, safely, send that over in a transaction, and you can look at this transaction now on the blockchain. It's encrypted, so only those that can decrypt that message will be able to see what that meter reading really is. But when the buyer gets that meter reading and decrypts it, the buyer can then verify that this energy reading is indeed, the energy reading they should be getting per the contract they've established. And that's when the buyer will will send over the payment on the blockchain. Payment is successful here, showing that payment there, and then we can look that transaction up on the blockchain. So I'll just end it here. It's a simple example, and it's something that can be repeated in a number of scenarios, whether it's for buyers and sellers, or chargers and vehicles charging, and other use cases. So at this point, I want to invite our panelists to come up and join us and continue the discussion on use cases. So before we continue that discussion on use cases, I just would like you all to quickly introduce yourselves and why you're here and why you're excited about the space.
Sure, so my name is Lydia Kreft. I've been working in blockchain and energy space for about 2 years now. Can everybody in the back hear me when I'm talking through here? That sounds good. I'm really excited about, and you guys will hear me talk about in a second, blockchain applications in the electric vehicle space. So I'm really excited to be here and share that with you guys, and also learn from you guys in the Q&A sessions.
Can y'all hear me? My name is Rena Shah, and I'm a principal at Kinship. We're a boutique advisory firm where I specialize in helping tech companies save energy. The client that I'm representing right now is Omega Grid, and we're building a blockchain rewards platform for energy usage. The reason why I'm excited in this space is that I think the energy industry gets a lot of bad rep of not being up to date, and I like seeing how blockchain will help.
Great. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. My name is Sherry Lee. I work for GE Power, and specifically GE Power Digital Business. Actually, it's quite exciting news that last December we announced the formation of a new company within GE, which is what we call it is the NewCo right now. It's a placeholder for a more fancy brand name that we'll come up with later. But that's basically the new industrial IoT business within GE, so the software piece of GE. So that will be the business that I work in. So I basically look at the potential of blockchain-based applications. Previously mainly focused on the GE Power digital portfolio, and I'm quite excited to expand the horizon a little bit more in the NewCo, and then also quite excited to have the opportunity tonight to interact with the local community in San Francisco.
So Lydia, why don't we start with you? We talked about peer-to-peer as one of the use cases. I know you've been working a lot, so please share what you're most excited about.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty excited about the application of blockchain in the electric vehicle space and blockchain and energy. So as Karen showed, and that was an awesome demo, thank you for sharing that with us, there's this really interesting opportunity for blockchain to be used to manage distributed energy resources. And when I think distributed energy resources, the most distributed of those energy resources is the idea of electric vehicles. If you look at a home, you always know where a home is. It's going to be at the same address all the time. And there's a lot of different nuances you have to manage when you have battery storage and solar at that home. But when you start to think about a distributed energy resource that can move, and it can be in California today, Nevada tomorrow, it can be in a CCA territory today, and a municipal utility territory tomorrow, you've got all kinds of crazy issues that you have to start to deal with. And so I think blockchain has a really useful application in that space. The other thing that I think is pretty interesting about electric vehicles and blockchain is that blockchain is inherently a horizontal technology. And so it doesn't just apply to the energy industry, right? It applies to all kinds of different industrial verticals. And if you look at the idea of EVs, they're essentially mobility. And there's all this other industry and all this other opportunity and all these other marketplaces that you can pull together. And so you don't need to just be focused on this idea of electric vehicles and blockchain and energy, but you have this opportunity to think bigger and to think about planning and how I pay my tolls, right? If I'm trying to drive from LA to Las Vegas, all of a sudden I'm leaving the CAISO and I'm moving into Nevada's territory, and at the same time I might want to pay some tolls on the way there. Although, as someone who's driven from LA to Vegas, I know there's no tolls on the way there. Then I might also want to pay for parking when I get there and maybe participate in demand response, right? And so there's this opportunity for blockchain technology to enable you to have this unique ID to participate in multiple marketplaces. And then finally, blockchain technology, or electric vehicles, to me, are just wild because we have to, specifically in the state of California, increase the amount of electric vehicles tenfold between today and 2030 if we're going to meet the governor's goals, and that's just light-duty vehicles. That's not thinking about buses and trucks and all these other medium and heavy-duty vehicles in the space. And so there's the things that we're doing today to manage electric vehicles are not going to work in 2025 and 2030. And so there's just like this amazing opportunity space for electric vehicles. And so what I've been looking at for the last couple of years is how can we apply this technology where we can see value add today, such that we can make sure that we're prepared for this future of electric vehicles 10, 15 years down the line. And we've seen this really interesting opportunity with the idea of carbon credits for electric vehicles. So in the state of California, there's this unique program called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard. And essentially, anybody who's importing oil or gasoline into the state creates deficits and they have to purchase credits. So it's kind of like a cap and trade program for alternative fuel vehicles. And if you're generating alternative fuels like ethanol or biodiesel or electricity, then you are able to earn credits and sell these into a marketplace. Electricity in the past has been pretty simple. You charge your electric vehicle with some kilowatt hours and you have one carbon intensity that's associated with those kilowatt hours. You create credits based on those two quantities. Moving forward, the California Air Resources Board, who manages this program, has decided, hey, you should be able to get more credits if you're charging when the sun's up, and less credits if you're charging when it's all natural gas on the margins. And so they're trying to create this program where electric vehicles can basically tie generation to consumption and create credits that are differing in real time. And so if you think about, kind of go back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like the way that we do things today doesn't necessarily mean we can do them like this in the future. Today, the Air Resources Board, for anyone who's generating these credits, basically takes in PDFs and Excel spreadsheets. And they look at those and they say, yep, it looks like you generated 100 credits. I'll put 100 credits into your very simple, centralized online account. As you think about going from hundreds of thousands to millions of electric vehicles and having to match at, say, 15-minute or hourly increments consumption with generation across multiple stakeholders. There's about 300 stakeholders in this program today. Just think about how many there might be in 2030. It provides this really interesting, unique opportunity to match generation and consumption via smart contracts, very similar to how Karen kind of showed that diagram of consumption and generation smart contracts today. And also provides this opportunity to kind of grow the marketplace and let smaller players in, enable microtransactions, which then provides more value for people to electrify. So it's this really cool ecosystem. I see all kinds of really interesting and unique opportunity there. And I've really enjoyed kind of working in the space and trying to understand what types of blockchain applications there should be or there could be, and kind of how to architect a solution that can really help us find that value today in the next 2 to 5 years that can then drive this innovation down the line.
Thank you. Very cool. And I'm sure we'll have more to talk about that one. So Rena, I know you've been working with Omega Grid, and Omega Grid's had some interesting projects around using blockchain in natural disasters. Could you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. We worked on a project with Stone Edge Farms in Sonoma, and essentially they own their own private microgrid, and we used our blockchain software to simulate a spot market with them where we could calculate locational prices at every node and basically trade in and out with our blockchain software. And what was interesting is that during that time it was the wildfires in Sonoma, and our blockchain was able to record still transactions in and out and show locational data for which units would still operate even as the grid was going down, and as which units would turn off. The other project that we're working on, I think, is a little bit more interesting. We're doing a pilot project with Burlington, Vermont for energy demand response. Essentially, we incentivize customers to reduce their demand response during peak time, and they get a token to redeem at a local merchant, like grab a movie with us, have a ice cream, something of that nature when they've done as we've said. So essentially, they get a text basically going, hey, it's peak hour. You could go home and turn on your AC, or if you just skip this, our token will automatically come through on a smart contract and give you your redemption award.
And thank you, Rena. And Sherry, could you talk a little bit more about what GE is doing in this space? I know you mentioned NewCo, but a little more detail on that.
Yeah, sure, because we are exploring the space in the NewCo. So basically, what we have been looking at are the applications within the GE Power digital space, or kind of the power systems. So I think Lydia touched upon the EV. You talked about the spot market. Really, this is a very exciting time for anybody who works in the power industry. And the reason is power industry is a very interesting industry. I don't know how many of you are from the energy/power space. It is one of the most foundational industry. We turn on the switch, we just expect the light to be on, but there are tons of people working behind the scenes, like for utilities in like PG&E, and it's really one of the most sophisticated system that we have ever invented. But this system is actually going through huge transformation. I think Karen mentioned at the very beginning, the proliferation of DER is one of the factors. For GE Power, we look at 4 trends, which is digitization, decentralization, and decarbonization, as well as electrification, which is the point that Lydia touched upon. So if we kind of look at these trends, I think the logical way of thinking would be, what are the transformation that's going on in the industry? And what would be the new business models that these trends will enable, will be calling for? And then look at what will be the technology or technical capabilities that's required to enable those new business models and opportunities for anybody, right? Like the utilities or technical provider like GE. So if we kind of map that, we think blockchain really has a great potential in terms of being the enabling technology for the future digital energy infrastructure. So that's why we think that there are a lot of values, and we're actually looking at different use cases across the power industry. So from generation, to transmission, to distribution, and all the way also to consumption as well. So I think in terms of the use cases, I think I might want to answer the question in a little bit different way, meaning that I think it will be key to talk about what will be the value that that we are trying to seek for, because we see a lot of these news coming out. You see a lot of talking about the what, but really what is the why, what is the value. So we see from the the generation, from use cases like emission record, data integrity piece. That will really help the power plants, and also maybe help the regulators save a lot of time in terms of seeing how do the data get reported, and then how do they audit those data. And then really from the kind of the wholesale energy market perspective, we see blockchain applications could potentially help the market participants save the productivity, and then also get to the level of operational efficiency, and then also talk about the retail energy markets. There are a lot of value over there as well. So definitely I think the value piece is very important, and then testing different use cases, and also finding the right blockchain implementation for different use cases is very important. I think we're really going through this journey all together in the power industry, and in the next couple of years, we will be kind of witnessing the blockchain in energy applications crossing the chasm.
So now that we've heard all these great applications and use cases for blockchain and energy, let's talk a little bit about why now, and what trends and what kind of changes have gone on in the state of California or in the world that have enabled us to move towards this more decentralized way of doing things. So starting with Leah, what's your perspective?
Sure. So I think that there's obviously a very clear trend of cost declines that are enabling more and more people to have their own energy at their own homes, right? So people have rooftop solar, the cost of batteries coming down, so more and more people are able to have batteries in their home, and electric vehicles, right? More and more people are starting to drive electric vehicles, and that causes a strain on the distribution grid. The distribution grid is built to send power one way from a big generator down to a home, right? And now all of a sudden people want to send power two ways. They want to send it from their home to their neighbors. And I think that there's two really interesting trends that are driving this idea of what can blockchain do for the energy industry. And one, as more and more people adopt these distributed energy resources, I'm hearing a louder and louder call to action to allow people to share their energy with their neighbors. So, I live close to the Berkeley campus. I don't actually, this is just an example. I live in North Beach over here, but say I live next to the Berkeley campus and they have a lot of solar and there's excess solar and they want to share it with my neighborhood full of professors, right? That idea is becoming louder and louder, and so I'm seeing that market demand becoming more and more of a demand. At the same time, one thing I think that's really interesting, it's different everywhere you go, is this idea of regulatory flexibility, right? So I think if you look to places like Europe or maybe Australia and even Asia at this point, there's a lot more regulatory flexibility, enabling people to test some of these new ideas. In California, a very large event that just occurred that's creating a lot of interesting regulatory uncertainty and flexibility, and that's one of the largest IOUs claiming bankruptcy, right? And so now there's this opportunity to think about, well, what should the utility look like, and what should energy look like for customers in California? So I see this really unique intersection right now where there's this regulatory flexibility that maybe wasn't there in the past, and there's this growing demand where there's this really interesting opportunity to see what kind of new technologies can enable people to have that local clean energy that more and more people are asking for.
Thank you. And so Sherry, did you want to add to that in terms of the global trends that you see?
Right, sure. I think Lydia touched upon a couple of markets and a couple of places. I think I think one of the things that come up a lot is kind of the regulation, right? So I think it's really interesting because the regulation will drive the different business models, and the different models will actually call for different kind of technology requirement. And what we're trying to do in the blockchain space a lot of times is kind of doing that bottom-up approach, saying that, hey, we have this really cool app and that will enable like a lot of future opportunities, and hey, regulators would like to take a look at this, and maybe we should change the regulation here and there. I think that from a regulation perspective, it really, all of us will have the same goal, which is getting the reliable, secure, and affordable electricity to the public, to everyone. So I think from that perspective, the end goal is the same. But I think for people working in the blockchain and energy space, and in the community, it will be very important for us to kind of demonstrate the specific value for the specific business cases and the specific business models, so that it can be considered. Because at the end of the day, we all share the same goal.
So I'll pause here for a second. Are there any regulators in the room? Anybody working with regulators?
Future regulators.
And so I'm going to ask the panel here, if you had one ask of the regulators or those who are talking to regulators, what would it be?
So one of the things that I really love is this idea in the UK, where Ofgem is basically the CPUC of the UK. They're the regulators of the utility space. They have this really cool thing called an innovation sandbox. And so it allows companies and utilities to try new things in a space where typically they might run afoul of regulation. There's nothing really that exists like that here in California. And so one of the things that I would love to see is that opportunity to push some boundaries and innovate in some ways that is still safe, still reliable, but kind of give that sandbox or that opening for people to test some new things. That might be something that takes 2 to 3 years, right, to get approved in a typical fashion. So
Very similar to Lydia. For us, at least for America Grant, we would like to see more innovation from utility investor-owned companies, in the sense that we want to interact with our customers. We want to hear what they want, and we want to do as they say. If they want clean energy and don't want to be using dirty energy, we want to be able to tell them that right now your energy is dirty, so let's not. So for us, we just want the flexibility to try different trials and see what works and what may not.
Yeah, I think very similar to the points earlier. I think sandboxes are great, and there are a couple of sandboxes in the U.S. and actually all around the world. I think that's very good environments for people to test new ideas, new business model, new application, as well as validate the technology feasibility. So I think at the end of the day, it's really about what is the value that we're trying to create, and then I guess also another part of the question would be, why do we think blockchain is that technology? Because there could be multiple technologies that could enable certain business models. So I think as a community, as the people who are working in this space, if we can get those answers really sorted out, and then it's really a matter of, I think there are channels that regulators are listening, there are sandboxes that we can test those ideas in, so eventually we will get there.
So I want to shift gears a little bit to, before we go to questions, how you got started in this space. And we'll start with Rena here, talk about how you got started. And I know, and I'm asking you because I know there are some people mining or providing mining resources in the room. So I want to just ask you about your experiences and how you would encourage others to get started.
Sure, I got started on the complete opposite spectrum. My background is actually, I'm a petroleum engineer. And I started mining because I heard about the misconceptions of Bitcoin mining and how much energy it was using. And I'm like, it's time for me to start calculating and see how much oil, if I equated it out, am I mining to create a coin. So I started mining Monero, and the results weren't that shocking. I'm like, okay, it's not too much, so let me try mining a different way. I started mining with all my servers being powered by community solar instead, to see if clean energy was going to, 1, cost more, and 2, be more resource intensive. Surprisingly, it was cheaper and easier. So I've been mining Monero for about 2 years, and what I equated that if I mine 1 Monero coin, if I was to equate it maybe to like gasoline or something like that, It's driving my car for barely 4 miles. Nothing.
Why Monero?
Honestly, Monero's the easiest coin to mine, and 2 years ago, not too much of it was mine.
I'm mining Grin, so if anybody has any questions or wants to talk about that, I'll happy to talk afterwards. But yeah, sorry, Lydia, you want to share your experience?
Actually, I had one of my coworkers mines, which is funny, and he uses it as a dual thing, right? He mines to earn his cryptocurrency, but it also heats his very small San Francisco apartment whenever he's cold. So it's
I
double value, yeah. So I'm a very hands-on person, and the way that I like to get started in the space is just to learn. Honestly, I'm not a coder. I don't have a development background. I'm an engineer by background, but it's to learn how to code basically. So I took a Coursera course on Solidity because I realized if I understood like the mechanics of Solidity, that would help me to better understand smart contracts and thus better understand Ethereum. Right now, I'm doing there's some really interesting basically modules you can go through on the Stellar website, which is pretty cool. So I recommend that to anyone who's interested in Stellar. But I really just like to dive in and get hands-on and troubleshoot my very poor development skills, which then helps me understand the much bigger challenges that lie in trying to integrate electric vehicles into a blockchain. So.
Yeah, the way I got started was really not starting from the technology per se. There was, one problem that we were trying to solve when I was working in GE for, our global operations team at that time, back in 2016. So the problem we were trying to solve is really cash, because a lot of the times, the customers or the suppliers, GE can't pay on time, or the customers can't pay on time. So we actually went down, we kind of look at the root causes. So a lot of the times it's actually disputes, and disputes in a way that actually it's just you have a ERP, I have a ERP, our information are not matching. It could be really as simple as, oh, the PO got split into 2 lines, and wait, it's not matching my records, I'm not paying. So we were really thinking about blockchain at that time, but we did want to develop a system that is future-proof. So we actually went ahead and looked at different technologies, and we found out that this is probably a technology that is eventually inevitable. So we developed the pilots using Hyperledger Fabric, and then really created this platform where you create that single source of truth for any kind of supplier-customer relationship. So that's how I got started. But at that time it was kind of one of the corporate executive console projects. And then when I came back to GE Power, which was my business, we started to look at, okay, what are the applications within the power industry? So that's how I got started. I would say to start, if you want to really start in the space, I think. Looking at, I think Lydia had a really good point. Go through the courses, look at the codes. I would say, like applications like CryptoKitty, you can go ahead and take a look at the codes. It's actually not that complicated. So it really gives you an idea as to, what does it mean, right? When we talk about these transactions, the apps that you see, what the kitty looks like. And so I think that's a good way to start.
Any other tips on how to get started? And this is not necessarily just the technical side of things, but any other good groups to join, consortium that you think are doing the right things, in terms of not just the technology but the policy and reaching out to make the broader changes.
So I think Buck left the room, and I don't know what happened to it, but they used to have a really awesome bi-weekly newsletter that came out that was about blockchain and the energy space. So we'll have to ask Buck if they still do that. Because you should subscribe to it if you're interested. Because it's a really great, they have 3 top stories of blockchain and the energy space, and you can just read the headline on the newsletter and you can dive into it on their website. So I find that great. And then also, I've been following the Energy Web Foundation, so if you guys are interested in blockchain and energy, they'll do a lot of webinars, and you can kind of follow along on their website. I think they're about to go live with their platform, which is pretty exciting in a couple of months. So I think they're a pretty good group to follow along just to kind of see what they're doing in the space.
So for the work groups that Karen was mentioning, so I know this is a very active space. There are new work groups pretty much probably every month, if not every week. So Seagray actually formed a new work group, and it's actually open to individual level. Because a lot of the work groups, some of the work groups are utility only or enterprise only. So this Seagray is actually individual you can become their member and join that work group. And then another way of joining, if any of the enterprises are interested, so I'm actually involved in the IEEE standard making, so I think the standard working group is another way. So there is the IEEE P2418.5, which is blockchain in energy standard. So if any one of you are interested, it's actually an enterprise type of work group, but that would be another way of getting really engaged with the industry players and start to collaborate and develop the future standard, because this is like the Wild West. So,
And this group.
yes, exactly.
Mine's a little bit different, but my favorite is actually through Reddit. There's a blockchain subreddit called Energy and Blockchain, and the community is fantastic. Almost every week they post study questions and resources that they found every week that was helpful.
So thank you for that, and this is just a partial list of some of the links. We'll send those out, plus the ones that were also mentioned here in our newsletter. So at this point, before we go to the lightning round, want to do some quick Q&A. Does anyone have any questions from the audience? Yeah, okay. I'll bring the microphone over.
Yeah, thanks for your talks. So you mentioned the electric car as sort of like the conduit to like connect blockchain and energy market. If you could pitch Elon Musk, what would you say, or how would you advise him as to how Tesla could utilize blockchain technology?
That's a good question. I like it. So I think a couple of value adds for the automakers. One is just that if you're able to enable your customers to gain more value from their vehicles, then those vehicles become more valuable to them and they're more willing to purchase your vehicles, right? So it kind of creates that network effect of being interested in continuing to own a Tesla, right? In addition, Elon Musk, I think everybody's pretty aware, is very interested in like breaking open the energy space, right? And so if you want to become the platform provider for the distribution utility, if you want to disrupt that space, right, and you want to enable transactions not just for electric vehicles but for your Powerwall and rooftop solar, then this is how you create that network effect. This is how you create that platform, and you become basically the market maker for the disruption of the utility space.
Hi, can you, as you probably know, the blockchain layer 1 technologies in solar are generally pretty secure, but we know that there have been problems with exploits of, say, smart contracts and whatnot. I mean, I could see, for example, on your grid, like a power buying pool, sort of like a mining pool, but then I could also see somebody who is sort of in charge of running that pool, like siphoning off either all the energy or all of the money. I just would like to hear you talk about any sort of security considerations that you have come to mind that you've planned for.
Great. Yeah. So I think security is of utmost concern when you look at how to apply blockchain for in the energy space, particularly on the distribution and transmission grid. So one of the things that we consider a lot is just, and it doesn't necessarily answer the idea of siphoning off, I guess, if you're looking at like a power pool, but just the idea of like transparency versus privacy, and anonymity versus knowing your customer. And I think that's something that we haven't necessarily solved yet, but some of the things that we're looking at is like how is the financial services industry going about trying to apply this technology? So looking at things like JP Morgan's Quorum or Ripple or Corda or Stellar, some of these applications that have been specific to the financial services industry that are looking specifically at security and how do we control for risk, counterparty risk, and creditworthiness and all that kind of stuff. And also how do we ensure that we're securing data and we're not enabling man-in-the-middle attacks and all of that good stuff, right? So I don't think I necessarily have an answer that says it's solved yet, but we're looking to other areas that are maybe a little bit more advanced or have looked at this already and trying to understand where they misstepped and where they did well, and then trying to emulate that and how we're thinking about applying it.
Hi, Karen. This is kind of a question for you, but I know also Sherry is thinking about this. and I'm sure all of you are thinking about it. But you know, in terms of being able to do decentralized power transfers, like what you showed with your example, right now when you get solar, most people have to use net metering, and you're selling back to the utility, right? And that's the way it's been, and it's cool, right? But it gives you, as a consumer, very limited flexibility. You don't have flexibility over the rate, and you basically just automatically sell back to the utility. So with the kind of example that you had, when do you see something like that? What regulation needs to come into place, or what regulations need to fall so to enable that kind of liberalization? And how soon can we see something like that happen? Because that would be a huge incentive to everyone if they can set rates and they can sell to their neighbors, et cetera.
Yes, absolutely. And so that's why I prefaced the example with this is the longer term sort of vision. Definitely there is a lot of regulation that has to happen. I mean, we have to have some way of saying that people are certified sellers, like they are certified for being able to sell this energy, and that they're not committing, say, you know, security issues, you know, for the grid. So that understandably is something that would take longer and is something the state would have to deal with. Not just if municipalities like Palo Alto are very excited because, you know, they're all green and, you know, they want to share energy, and they have laws around houses who can't have solar because of the trees. So yeah, so there is quite a bit of regulation. So that's why totally agree with you, and that yes, that would be the vision, that is the plan. Now, I agree completely with Lydia that in the medium term to short term, we have to do some more practical projects, and those include like the electric vehicle kind of applications you talked about. You know, getting people really to think about the blockchain as this ledger, right? As this distributed database first, so where we store information, and then using it as a much more efficient way of paying, right? So like in your case, right, so there's net metering, but then I don't get anything back, right? Because I have solar, right? That's why I do my mining too. I have solar, so I can mine and keep my house. Anyway, just kidding. Not that simple, but yes, it is a problem because I don't get anything back, and I could, right? And so those are things that we want to say look towards the future, but in the short and medium term, say that using the blockchain to incentivize, you know, behavior like charging. You know, we should charge our electric vehicles at certain times, and if we can get more credits for that, great. You know, that makes sense. And then later on, if we can start, you know, sharing or selling those credits on an open market, that yes is, you know, monitored, controlled by entities that are doing that today. You know, it's a more realistic on-ramp to using some of these things that we talked about, and then over time, you know, pulling in or creating that regulation. And that's my perspective. So.
No, I think to your question, I think it's a journey that we're going through. And I think if we look at, I mean, again, going back to the value of what this technology can bring to us, there's the operational value, there's the transformational value. So the operational value would be not having to change the market structure, the regulation, but just applying the blockchain technology, you know, adding maybe that layer, you know, creating that operational efficiency, getting the productivity saving, that's the operational value. And then the transformational value would be enabling a peer-to-peer trading, you know, not the green attributes, but the actual energy trading. You know, use cases like that would be the transformational type of value. I think this is the journey that we're going through would be, you know, right now I think there is a kind of a shift in the utility space that we are more focused on the operational value of blockchain technology. So, you know, getting this technology kind of, you know, the value validated, the business case validated, and then at the same time, as the technology get more and more mature, I think, you know, like, you know, topics like security, and then also topics like scalability and interoperability. As we progress, the use cases will mature as well. So eventually we will, you know, get to the point where, yes, you know, transactive energy will be possible on blockchain. So I think that's the journey we'll have to go through.
I just have one following question. I think that's a great distinction you just drew, Sherry. And I'm just wondering, from the standpoint of working with large incumbent utility operators, what incentive do they have to transform? I mean, we all understand the incentive for consumers and actual users to adopt, but what's the incentive for the actual incumbents to transform?
Right. I think probably Lydia will have great perspectives on this as well, but let me just throw my 2 cents out there first. So I think when we talk about use cases like peer-to-peer trading, right? So there will be the validated value for like a prosumer, but at the same time will be that value for the grid operators. Is it maximizing the flexibility? Is it providing the billing system that's the most efficient? Is it deferring those infrastructure investment? So I think in the short term, the kind of the decision-making process for the utility executives would be very naturally look at what is my ROI for this piece of technology, for this pilot application, whatever that we want to call it. And then at the same time, in the long run, how do we look at those metrics when we talk about a piece of application like peer-to-peer trading? I felt like that's the the key drivers for the utilities in terms of making a decision as to, do I want to explore this technology? How much do I want to invest? But Lydia would probably have much better perspectives.
So I think, especially in areas where there's a lot of high penetration of distributed energy resources and renewables, utilities are realizing that the business model that's lasted for the last 100 years isn't going to be the same business model going forward. Utilities typically, especially in California, make money on the poles and wires that they put into the ground, but as you have more and more of these distributed energy resources, there's more opportunity to manage those resources and use things like demand response, energy efficiency, battery storage to manage the distribution grid. And so I think the incentive for a forward-thinking utility would be to look at how that business model is changing and try to understand where they fit within that business model that's much more customer-focused and much more focused on managing the distribution grid than maybe it was in the past with this one-way power flow grid that was very focused on that infrastructure that's going in the ground. Oh, another one here.
My questions are more for you, actually, Karen, on your experiment. I missed a little bit of the setup of the context. So 3 clarifying questions. Is there assumed to be any net energy metering value from that model that you showed? Or is this sort of like when it's gone to, you're not getting anything back? Or maybe you just need more power for your mining operation from your neighbors? The second one was, does the seller get the full value of the energy, or is it kind of like the CCA's work here, where you only get the generation portion, so you're only getting like 1/3 of the value of the energy? And then finally, I guess, is that even like legal here? Like, my understanding is if you're transmitting AC power across a road, that it's not legal because we've given utilities monopolies over that. But if you transmit DC power, that's not illegal. So I don't know if you like transmit DC or AC, or like if you dealt with that, or just like whatever, it's not legal at all. So we'll just deal with that later. So those are my questions.
Yeah, so those are good questions. Yeah. So I'll say just to be very upfront, this was a project where we were trying to prove out the technology, that the technology would work. So yes, there's a lot of legal issues that we did not address as in this phase, right? This was all about, look, we can model this in the lab, and let's use this per, Lydia's last point, to work with utilities, to work with regulators, to come up with what makes sense, what should be the right policies around this type of scenario. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and that's also why I'll throw in a plug for NREL, for the National Renewable Energy Lab, why we work with them, because they have this platform that they build up technically, but also because they have the research facilities and the expertise in-house to be able to model these different situations, so we can come up with the best possible answers and policy decisions. Are there any other questions? Okay. Oh yeah. Well, let's do one more, and then we'll go to the lightning round.
Yeah. So just to follow on to the last question, I mean, before this last one, really about the incentives, right? And I'm wondering, as we go to a market that's more based on DERs, you get into management issues, right? So as you get into management issues, you get into thinking about, well, how do we manage? Is it going to manage by itself, or do we need things like virtual power plants, VPPs? And so in terms of VPPs, do you think that they are inevitable, or can the market work by itself? And if VPPs are inevitable, who would be the ones to run them and sell them?
So I think that VPPs are inevitable in the intermediate term. I don't know if they're inevitable in the long term. I think they're a stepping stone. Like, I don't think people are ready right now to participate in markets to the extent that they're actually going to help manage the grid. Like, there's niche people who are like, yeah, let me sell my energy, and I'm gonna participate in this market. I'm gonna set the energy that I'm willing to buy and I'm willing to sell on my app, and let's do it, right? I don't necessarily know if there's enough momentum there, and so you need that idea of a VPP to almost manage all those distributed energy resources in the near term. But I think what you're ultimately getting to, which is like, I think to me the biggest question about blockchain in the energy industry is command and control versus distributed control, right? And so I think most utilities right now are just starting to get into the idea of DERMS, or distributed energy resource management systems, which are very much command and control, right? We tell you when you can turn on and when you can turn off. You can connect to our grid only if you sell energy back between the hours of 2 and 4, right? And this idea of blockchain and peer-to-peer, and what Karen did with NREL, is very much like fully distributed. My home is the brain and is deciding if it's going to participate or not. And price signals are going to be what enables the grid to maintain itself. To me, I don't see a path there without a VPP, right? I think there has to be that intermediary step where there's still this idea of aggregators and VPPs, and eventually you might find yourself down that path, very far from now. But I'm definitely not the one to say yes or no at this point. I don't know. I think we're still all learning. If you guys have anything to add to that.
So thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. And we really encourage you to come up. And we encourage you to come up. Love your questions, all your questions. So we want to continue those next phases of the projects that we just described. So we'd love to hear more about how we can do that together. So right now I'd like to hand over to Marzanne, who will go through the lightning round.
Hello, my name is Marzanne DeLoop, and I'm one of the organizers here at Blockchain by Women. For those of you, do you know, or who all knows, what the lightning round is about? Okay, a couple of hands. So I'll quickly explain. So when we started this group, the whole premise was how do we get more females in the blockchain space? How can we attract and recruit more women? And throughout this organization, we've started. Now there's like a pretty big women base that we're in contact with, that we're recruiting to come join in, listen to our events, come and be speakers on our panels, sponsors, help us with these, and really just connecting the community. And in ways we do that is either like recruiting, help startups with funding. There's multiple ways that women can get involved. So with that, what we do is we created this lightning round where we will showcase a couple of projects where women will come and speak either about their project, about their company, and then also what their need is from this group. Is it recruiting? Is it funding? Is it just a user base, just getting the word out there? Or just finding more mentors, female mentors in the space? I always say behind every strong woman, there is a strong guy, but behind every strong guy, there's a stronger woman. So jokes aside, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the lightning round. Sherry, I'm going to start with you. Maybe you can just explain more about like what's going on GT, the female presence in GT, and then also what can us as a group help support you with?
Right, sure. I would really start by saying that why we, decided to sponsor this event. And by the way, I think this is a great initiative. The blockchain, times women. This is a great initiative. One of the reasons why we decided to sponsor the event because it's very relevant. Because we are kicking off this initiative in the NewCo, which I mentioned for GE Women in Digital Technology. Really kind of the tagline there is we're hoping to hire, develop, and retain, the women in technology as women engineers or technology leaders. So I feel like this initiative is very relevant for us to sponsor these kind of events. And then also, we're hoping to make GE a great place to work for women leaders, especially in digital technology. And then the second reason is we're also hiring. Architects, developers, so I feel like this is a great place to engage with the local talents in blockchain and specifically in the power industry as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Terrific. No, thank you for being here tonight. So after this event, what we'll do is we'll also send a little email out with recaps, and then she would also share, we'll have a link where to apply, how to apply, who to be in contact with at GE, so we can make sure we can get the right people connected. So for sure. Also, I want to, Marina, do you want to come up here just for a second? They have been helping us live stream this event, which is terrific. Our goal is going forward to really broadcast this internationally. There's a lot of women who want to be part of an organization like this and not be able to either commute here, not in the same city, hard schedules. So it's nice to have a recap, have it recorded, as well as live streaming. So maybe you can tell us more about the company, how you guys started, and then obviously you're tonight helping us out significantly.
Thank you, President. Hello, everyone. I'm Marina. I'm co-founder of a company called BFast TV. It's an online video channel. We cover tech events, tech-related events, and produce different short documentaries about startup founders. So, and we help here in San Francisco we help event organizers like Blockchain by Women and other tech organizations to increase their community and network. So for example, here we have 50, 60 people, but if we live stream the event like this, so people who cannot attend the event here in San Francisco, they can just tune in and watch this wonderful panel discussion online and just even chat with each other and then send the question to the panelists as well. So in order to, if you have friends or colleagues too who will be interested in this panel discussion, they can rewatch again the panel on bfast.tv/blockchain by women. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. That's terrific. They were setting up, and I can't wait to actually see it. It looks super cool how they do the little cameras and all of that. Like, it's very high tech. So you can just tell by the camera. It's pretty professional. So great job, guys. Sherry from Elemental. So she's part of an accelerator, and she's going to share more about the fund and the history and how that came about.
Hi everyone, I'm Sherry with Elemental Accelerator. I'm the deal flow manager, which means I kind of oversee our application process. We're actually looking for applicants for startups right now. We fund startups from C to Series C, and we'll fund them up to $1 million. And we look for energy, water, agriculture, food, mobility, and also circular economy. We're also looking for applications of blockchain and energy right now, so we're kind of in the exploratory phase of that. And we funded 82 companies, $30 million. So looking for our next cohort, it'll be our 8th cohort this year.
Well, that is exciting. Great. I'm going to put you here on the spot just for a second. Do you mind sharing one or two, maybe just one of your great blockchain use cases that you're currently working with, and maybe just share a little bit, add a little color to it?
Sure. So we have one company right now, they're called VIA, and they're working with utilities to look at possibly tracking equipment failure. So that's one of the newer use cases. But I think besides that, we're kind of like looking at other use cases like EVs or supply chain, just kind of looking at the field right now.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry I put you in the spot there, but it's always very interesting. So, alrighty, that kind of wraps up our lightning round. Once again, we will share all of this information, links, as well as the live feed in our email, so you will get all the links, which is pretty easy. We would love for you to join our Telegram group. The link and the invite would be there as well. It's a private group. It's not a public group. We had to change it. We all use Telegram. We know why. So, but you will get the link through that and get connected. Also, our next event is March 20th, and we're going to discuss blockchain use cases, what's working and what is not. So you're going to hear from entrepreneurs, from experts, and how they develop their companies, Also, how did they get adoption, which we all know is pretty big. You can have the greatest idea, but until you get adoption, it's not really a company. So we're going to hear from Olga Mak from QuantStump, the first decentralized security auditing platform, and then also from Sarita Jones, CEO at Trustalot. So these are two powerful females. We can't wait to have them next round. And the link for this event will be up. It actually is up already. Please register. Make sure you secure your spot for that event. And the website will be updated soon too with this information. Lastly, we loved having every one of you here. We would love to speak to you and connect with you individually. So please find Karen, myself, or Marina. It's important for us to be connected in this community and really help each other and also recruit more women and men for that matter. So it's a small industry. So lastly, we also love for any sponsors, for volunteers, for help. We're always open to that. There is an admin link on our website. Just please feel free to send us a quick note, become part of our mailing list. We would love to get more of you involved, so actively. So thank you all very much for your time, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Good luck.